and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, you can call him Ishmael. It's Mr. Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
I think it's better if you don't listen to this podcast because it'll just make you sad.
I mean, you're not wrong. You are certainly not wrong. This week on the show, our series Deconstructing the Films of Darren Aronofsky concludes with the director's eighth and most recent film. We're talking about 2023's? 22's? I usually look this up and I forgot to. 2022's The Whale. Then, Matt, we're going to take a look back at our time with Aronofsky. We're going to chat about what we learned and perhaps wonder about where his career goes from here. And that's the show.
Awesome.
That's what we're doing. Yeah. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about Darren Aronofsky's The Whale.
You don't stay in touch with Mom?
She really only tells me things about you.
Why?
Because that's all I want to know about.
Why'd you gain all that weight?
Someone close to me passed away, and it had an effect on me.
You haven't seen her since she was 8 years old and you're gonna reconnect with her?
Sorry.
I don't like this. This isn't a good idea.
I'm sorry.
You say you're sorry one more time, I will shove a knife right into you, I swear to God.
Go ahead. What's it gonna do? My internal organs are 2 feet in at least.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
A reclusive, morbidly obese English teacher attempts to reconnect with his estranged teenage daughter.
This movie was written by Samuel D. Hunter. It was directed, of course, by Darren Aronofsky and stars Brendan Fraser, Hong Chow, Sadie Sink, and Ty Simpkins. Matt, this movie won Brendan Fraser, who we absolutely adore, an Academy Award for Best Acting. It also won for Best Makeup, and that's about all it did. And I'm curious, what did you think of The Whale?
What an interesting movie to end this project on. It seems weird to say that I liked it because it's so horribly unpleasant in the same way that so many other Aronofsky films are, but maybe more so in various ways, and kind of without the spectacle that comes along in some of them to sort of balance it out. Brendan Fraser deserves his Oscar, I think. He was a highlight. He made me quite emotional with his performance. I thought that was crucial to the movie working. And there are a few things I want to talk to you about. I think this is going to be a good conversation because there are certain things about the movie I walked away from it not quite knowing what to do with, or whether certain things were intended to be ambiguous or I'm merely dense. But overall, like a lot of good stuff here. And again, this is, I think last time we talked about Mother and how it was quite a ride, quite an experience, but not a movie I'd recommend to people. I kind of feel similarly about this one, where it's like, man, you got to be in a very specific mood to want to watch The Whale. Yeah. But that's not to say that it's not great art. Like it definitely makes you feel things. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm really conflicted about this movie. I really am. And part of what I've been doing since I finished watching it is asking myself why I enjoyed Mother so much and struggled so much with this movie. Because I agree, both of them are difficult to watch. Both of them are really intense. Both of them exist in a small, tight space where we're getting very up close and personal with our character. And I really, really enjoyed what Mother was doing, and I really struggled with what this movie was doing, and I'm not sure why. So that's hopefully something that I hope to interrogate and discuss tonight. I think I agree with you on Aronofsky or on Brendan Fraser. You know, there's this thing that happens when you have an actor put on a bunch of makeup, or in this case, a 300-pound fat suit, which, by the way, the thing he was wearing really weighed 300 pounds. Uh-huh. So he was doing a little acting when he was walking around with that thing on, but not much because he was lugging an additional 300 pounds around with him.
Right.
like normally when an actor does that, it's like, oh, we have to award them now, and it's always like, well, did they deserve that, or was it just the prosthetics doing the performance for them, and we're honoring that? And I really do feel in this movie that we were honoring Brendan Fraser, who obviously had to go through all that stuff, yes, but just like taking his weight aside, gives an incredible performance.
Yeah.
Like, and almost like, I don't know how you make this movie without Brendan Fraser in this role, because it just seemed like the perfect Brendan Fraser thing, where he's just incredibly kind, incredibly optimistic. There's this recurring motif of him apologizing constantly for everything, for existing, essentially.
Right.
And I just can't imagine anyone else doing this ever. Like, it feels like it was written for Brendan Fraser, and it wasn't, because this is based off of a play. The screenplay was written by the playwright. And so it wasn't written for Brendan Fraser, but it just seems like this is the role Brendan Fraser was always building up to play. And he is magnificent. He really is. Like, the things he does with a script that I don't think is that great, actually, and in a performance that I don't think the directing is really lending him any favors, is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And I guess that sentence there clues you in on what I think might be some of my problems with this movie, is basically everything else.
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting because I don't know if I'm going to be as negative as that, but like, one thing you can say about the movie is like, it's kind of all of the depressing parts of Mother and all of the depressing parts of The Wrestler, and none of the like grandiosity of those movies that kind of make them a little bit fun.
Yeah.
I mean, those are both tough sits too, but they're like, wow, this is wild. This is a wild, crazy movie that I'm watching. And this is just like, this is a nightmare.
Yeah, well, and in Mother, his directorial flourishes, I think, were fully on display too. Like his franticness and his ability to do interesting things with the camera. And I just felt like all that was missing from this movie. Like, I read afterwards that it was based on a play, and I'm like, oh, did you shoot and block the movie as if it was a play? Because that's what it feels like at times. Like, just the choice to put the camera where it's putting. I have a real problem with this movie, Matt, where I don't know how Aronofsky wants me to feel about the main character, how it wants me to feel about Charlie, because it feels like, obviously, we're supposed to pity him, but I feel like there are times when the camera is like gawking at him in morbid fascination and disgust. And I don't know how to feel about those things. I'm just very torn about it, because like, one thing Aronofsky does in this movie is he, like, when Charlie is moving around, it's like the mix in the movie turns up the creaking. When he's resting on the walker, the amount of noises coming out of that walker, as if to really make it as strained as possible, is really accentuated. Like he wants you to not only know this guy is obese, obviously, but like feel it and hear it and experience it fully. Like the movie is shot in it's not widescreen. It's like I forget the actual resolution, but it's a smaller frame, which makes Charlie look even bigger in the frame, which is definitely intentional.
Yeah.
And I just don't know how to feel about a lot of that stuff. I'm so conflicted on it, because the scenes that I think work the best for me are almost the scenes where I forget Charlie is morbidly obese and I'm just watching two characters interact. Like, I think the relationship between him and his daughter, like, is awesome. And I think Sadie Sink, who plays Ellie, like, does a really good job there too. And like, you forget at times, like, who he is. And that stuff really worked on me dramatically. And then we go back to like, let's watch him walk around again. And I don't know, man. I don't know how I feel about this.
I also thought his relationship with everyone that he has a relationship with is like the highlight, where there's like, I think that's one thing that really, the strength of it is that it was a play. So there's like, there's parts of it where you really feel the fact that it's a play and it's good. And then there's parts where you really feel the fact that it was a play and it's a little wobbly.
Yeah.
And the good side is when there's like a discrete scene where the scene is well structured and well written within the scene, at least, and you have
Yeah.
his interactions with his nurse, who actually is like his friend, who
Yeah.
actually is the sister of his lover, and his ex-wife. God, that was an incredibly interesting and like nuanced, and
Yeah.
like I appreciated that scene just for not jumping for all of the normal tropes that you would do with that sort of relationship.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah, because it's a fucked up thing this family has dealt with now, right?
Yeah.
Like he's this gay man that has a daughter with this woman, leaves her for a student. It's night school, so he's an adult student, so it's fine.
Right.
Falls in love with that man. That man is extremely religious, is banned from his religion, which causes him to eventually commit suicide. And now his sister is his caretaker because he lets himself go. And all these relationships are so complicated, and there's so much anger and pain and hurt intermingled in all of it.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. The characters capture that really well. The dialogue, I think, is often very, very well done in those scenes too. Yeah, like again, it's a play, right? Like that's the strong point, is how those characters talk and interact with each other. Every time we like do the play thing where we just carve two characters off to talk to each other for a while, like it is very, very good, I think. It's just kind of everything else.
Yeah. So I wanted to return to your point about all of the sort of pornographic views of him suffering.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. So I think what we're trying to do with that is emphasize how horrible his life is, and I guess furthermore, like this is a kind of self-inflicted penance.
Yeah.
And this is one thing where the movie makes me feel dumb, because I'm like, I don't like to say, hey, this movie should have spelled this out for me because I'm a baby who can't read subtext. But this is one case where I'm like, okay, is it supposed to be clear to me that he's like killing himself on purpose, and like he basically overate himself to death on purpose as a kind of penance for leaving his daughter? Or is it more just that he fell into a depression? See, this is the thing, I'm not sure. Is it that he fell into a depression because his lover died, and this made him understandably very sad, and he started eating to cope with it, and that's why he became obese? Is it both of those things? Are we meant to inspect the ambiguity of the situation? Did any of this even occur to you as relevant? Because it was something that actually bothered me quite a bit, because I was basically like why is he perpetually sorry? Why is he miserable? Why does he hate himself? Is it because of what happened? Like what is his inner narrative of himself? What is his inner story of himself?
Yeah.
Because I'm not clear on it, which is weird because of how much he explains himself. But you feel whenever he's explaining himself like he's rationalizing.
Yeah, I think that's what the sorry is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is. He is definitely a person who has an enormous amount of self-pity, and like the idea that he's constantly apologizing, but like he's never like fixing the behavior. It's just like he says I'm sorry almost instinctually, right?
Yeah,
like it's not like he's apologizing for eating himself to death.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to be like, I'm sorry, but he's not going to stop doing that.
Right.
Like it is almost, and that's why I think the Liz character is so driven insane by it. It's because like, shut up. Like it doesn't mean anything if you just say it. You
Right.
like experience it. As to your question about like why the eating and like, I think it's a little of both. I mean, I don't think he consciously decided one day that, hey, I'm going to eat myself to death. I think he just like started eating as a coping mechanism, and the way these things go is it's just in small increments. You let yourself go, and suddenly a couple years later you're 400 pounds and then 500 pounds, and then yeah, I mean, he's got a psychosis around it, obviously. Like you don't get that big without really trying, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to eat a lot.
Yeah, and he clearly was like it was his job almost. Well, that's okay, and see, I guess maybe that's why this was sticking with me. Is everything you said is totally right, and I feel weird and dumb for even bringing this up, because it's possible that the movie was just like yeah, he got really depressed because his boyfriend died, and then he started eating because it made him feel slightly better. And this is just what, and then like one thing led to another, and now we're here. And I was like, but like, there's so many scenes of him getting an entire bucket of chicken and then eating it in a way, like, and it focuses on his facial expressions while he's doing it. It's almost like he's sitting down to business, and he's like,
Yeah.
time to power through this. And you're like, what am I supposed to feel about this exact moment right here while I'm watching him eat the fried chicken? Is it like,
Yeah.
is it a compulsion? Is he, again, I almost feel like I'm being weird, but I simultaneously don't, because okay, here's why I don't feel like this is stupid and I'm missing the point, because the whole movie and like the climax of the movie really hinges on like, what are his motivations? Like, why did he essentially abandon his daughter? And it's confusing also, not necessarily in a bad way, but it's a little confusing because he's like full of shit often. Like, he has this repeated line where he'll say like, I wanted to be part of her life. I wanted to be part of her life. And I gave the money, and I always ask your mom about you. But then you actually step back from it and you examine his actions, and it's like, the mom was not really keeping them apart. He just did not make the effort.
Yeah.
And he was, and I was actually so confused about this that I read other people's interpretations about this online, which I usually don't do. I usually am like, if I'm confused, I'll figure it out. But this was one where I was just like, I'm like double confused. And somebody had a cool interpretation that I liked, which was like, her essay, which of course is this recurring motif, the essay that she wrote about Moby Dick, maybe like, is this concept he's hinging his decision on, where much like, much like the essay says, Ishmael tells you long, boring stories about whaling so that he doesn't have to tell you the sad story of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Our main character is doing a kindness to his daughter by excluding her from his sad mess of a life.
Yeah. I mean, the line
yeah.
to her of like, who would want me to be in their lives? I think this is here's what I think. I think this is a man with an incredibly low self-esteem. I think he was always a bigger person, even before he was as horribly obese as he is in this movie. Like I think it's interesting that the camera doesn't ever like let us see like a full clear picture of what he looked like.
Yeah.
But we can see he was a large man.
Yeah.
And he was so much filled with self-doubt, really self-deprecating, did not particularly like himself. And then this man fell in love with him, and like, he kind of hitched everything onto this idea that, oh, this person over here loves me, and ran away from everything else that provided him with uncertainty and self-doubt. He ran away from it. And jumped full force into this thing with this man, and then it wasn't enough for this man, right? Like, his, I can't remember what his name is. Brian? No, Alan, because his name is Alan Grant.
Yeah.
Which you saw on a folder,
right.
Which was great.
Yeah.
By the way, if people don't know, that's the character from Jurassic Park. I don't like, that's not intentional, right? I think that, I don't know.
No, I don't think it's intentional, because I also kind of did the double take, and then I ultimately concluded that we weren't doing anything with this. It was just a coincidence.
Yeah. And it wasn't enough for him, and the man eventually killed himself, which, like, taking the one person that gave you some feeling of self-confidence and then having that person choose to die rather than be with you, spiraled him to the point where he got himself into this position he's in now. And I do think, like, I don't know if he would ever actually say consciously that, yeah, no, I'm killing myself, but I think it's very clear from the beginning of the movie, at least when we meet him in the final week of his life, that he's just like, guess I'll die now.
Right. Yeah, it's like it's a letting go kind of killing himself, where it's like, oh, I don't want to be alive anymore.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to actively do it, but I'm not going to do anything to stop it.
Yeah, and he's such a frustrating character, because you just want to be like, and as a person who's on the larger side myself, I totally understand the sentiment of like, I'm not happy with how I look right now, and I want to do something about it, but then I don't actually. I get that. I feel that, but he's so frustrating in that's every aspect of his life.
Yeah.
Every aspect of his life, it's like that's why the I'm sorry is so frustrating, because it's like, no, you're not. If you were sorry, you would not tell me to bring you a big bucket of chicken or inhale this meatball sub so fast that you choke on it.
Yeah.
Like, if you were sorry, you wouldn't do those things, and yet you're continuing to do them. And
Yeah.
the Liz character is so fascinating to me because she's essentially enabling him.
Right. I was just gonna say that like every character is sort of a snarl of hypocrisy and contradiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, go on. You're exactly right, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I love that what we learn about her. You know, when we meet her, we don't realize that she's Alan's brother, our sister, and also a nurse, and so like she just kind of assumes this caretaker role, but the caretaker that is going to continue to bring you the food, that's gonna be okay, like when you say, no, I'm not going to the hospital, that's going to do all these things and know that he's killing himself and not do anything about it. And I love the reveal that the reason for it is because she feels indebted to him on some level. That, you know, the line that you gave my brother the only happy years of his life. So she feels like she owes it to him to allow him to live the way he lives, and is just enabling him the entire time. And it just, that drives you crazy too. Like, all these characters like drive you fucking crazy. And in the middle of it, you have this guy who is so earnestly like optimistic about everything but himself, that like everyone is the best, people are wonderful, everyone's great except for me.
Yeah.
And that's really frustrating too, because it's like, let me be frank here, Matt. He's in love with this essay that his daughter wrote. It's not that good of an essay. It's like, this is Moby Dick. It's like the metaphor, the Moby Dick metaphor that we're presented with here is kind of, I don't want to say obvious, but like it states it out pretty clearly. And it's supposed to be this brilliant transcendent thing, and it's just like, no, it's just like everyone has their own whale.
Yeah.
And they won't actually make you happy. It's like, yes, we've read Moby Dick, we get that. Like, I don't think it's expanding upon that metaphor any. It's just like attaching that metaphor to these characters in the story and just saying that is true here also.
Yeah. And everybody's doomed and hopeless. And
yeah.
I mean, in this way, it's interesting how, you know, Aronofsky is definitely one for downer endings.
Yeah.
But I feel like in most of his other movies, there's a kind of like beautiful closure to the downerness, where it's like the poignancy of the Black Swan. It's like, yes, but she attained perfection. Yes, she died. Yes, she destroyed herself. Yes, this was all horribly unhealthy. But within her universe, her inner universe, she attained perfection, and this was this was something beautiful, even in kind of a screwed up way. Same thing for the wrestler, sort of same thing for the fountain in a more different way.
Yeah.
Requiem for a Dream is like, it makes you wistfully sad. I mean, if anything, Requiem for a Dream is the most similar to this in terms of how it leaves you, because it's just like, here's a bunch of people who are damned by but basically not even their mistakes, just like life screwed them all over in this like snarl of bad choices, which at the time didn't seem like bad choices, and then they all come to regret them. And it's like the universe makes them pay far out of proportion to the magnitude of the sin. The end, humanity is doomed. And I think one thing that confuses me about the movie too, which again, I'm not like, and therefore the movie sucks, it's just like, this genuinely confuses me, is like, we throw the God stuff in there. And it's a big part of the movie. I say we throw it in there. It's like one of the characters is like the missionary, and he's trying to help people. And the Bible shows up, and there's Bible quotes, and we know that Aronofsky is interested in religion. And I'm just like, what? Like, were we deconstructing that, or were we actually saying like, no, like you can save people by just trying? I genuinely don't know what we're saying with all that.
I don't know what we're supposed to do with the Tommy character. I really don't. I mean, the only thing I can think of that is like the way the Tommy character. So, okay, let me ask you this. So at the end of the movie, Ellie has taken pictures of Tommy doing drugs, blah, blah, blah. We learn that she has found the church that he attends, contacted the church and his parents and basically turned him in. And Charlie, ever the optimist, is convinced that she wasn't doing that for mean purposes. She was doing that to attempt to save him. And that's the thing that he grabs onto as he's dying is, my daughter is good. My daughter is wonderful. I have done something good. Yes, this is it. And that's what he's desperately grabbing onto as in his final moments of life. Do you think that's true?
This is exactly one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because I don't know. And I don't know if it's like, well, you're meant to sit with that question, or if it's like, no, I just don't know is the truth. Because it certainly didn't seem like it. It seems like, I think we are meant to grapple with the question is the truth. Because like her mom, we explicitly, textually have this thing where her mom says she's evil, which was a really interesting interaction, because her mom is like, look, I raised her. I live with her. I see her every day. She's messed up in the head. She's evil. And other people, and her husband, who has no idea what he's talking about, is like, no.
Yeah, like he's his arguments against this are like, no. But she's like describing all the things she's doing, which are objectively terrible things.
Yeah.
She's bullying people. What does it say she does to the teacher? Like slash their tires. Like she seems out of control. And he has some responsibility in this because he abandoned her. Like it is at least partially his fault.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm a cynic, but like, I think she did it because she enjoyed fucking him over, because he's this guy that talked about, getting to be free and hoping to do something. And I don't read it as she did it because she recognized this was the only way to help him get home. I think that's his desperate rationalization, just like he desperately rationalizes everything. Desperate to try to cling on to something good as he dies. And that's the saddest fucking ending ever.
Right. Well, so I think there's enough room for some nuance to this, but it's vague enough. So there's plenty of stuff she does that's just horrible, like taking pictures of him and putting the pictures online just to mock him, and it's like that you can understand as like, well, she's real. I can't imagine the anger that she must feel at this man.
Oh yeah.
So like on that level, you're like, that's not because she's evil. That's not because she's a psychopath. That's because she's just really angry at him. Mm-hmm. And then similarly, she breaks it. Like she sees that he's like feeding this bird who sits outside his window, and she breaks the plate that he feeds the bird on. And it's like, that could be the action of just a remorseless murderer. Or it could be that it's like, oh, you abandoned me, but you're taking care of this bird. Like this bird has replaced me as your daughter, like who you're supposed to be taking care of. Fuck this bird. And so you're like, I kept being caught between that complexity of like, well, you can read this as like, she's a bad person, or you can read it as like, she's very like understandably angry and feels like just totally desolate all the time. And then, but that still leaves the question of what you just said, where it's like, okay, I'll set all that aside. What were her actual motives in contacting the church? Mm-hmm. And I don't know. And I think we're meant to not know for sure.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think because the optimist in me wants to believe that he's right, that like, because it is really interesting that she writes this haiku in her notebook, and it's I forget exactly what the haiku says. It ends with "I hate everyone," and he reads this and he's distraught, and then he realizes it's in 575 or whatever it is, and then he's like elated because it means she's smart and she's good, and like he's so desperate. Like, I mean, that line is like, I want to prove that I did one thing in my life right, and like that's a lot to put on a person whose life you were not involved in at all after the age of 6 or whatever it was. That's like a lot. That's like a lot to put on someone. And like, I can't, like, you are so sympathetic to him at times because he's Brendan Fraser and he's so kind and he's so nice. But at the same time, you're like, yeah, but you're disgusting. And I don't mean physically, although that is true. The movie emphasizes that. But the same way his daughter says this to him, he is kind of a disgusting person in that, like, in the way he treats people.
That's really interesting. That's a great articulation. I love that you frame it this way, because it's like he almost like wants people to focus on the morbid obesity and the homosexuality as like, do these things offend you? Am I disgusting to you because of these things? And it's like, no, man, the thing that offends me is your choices. And your abandonment of your daughter and your like callous disregard for and like, oh, you have $130,000 in a bank account. What do you fucking do, man? Like you're not being responsible. And I get that he's depressed and all that, and it's like, yeah, it's very sad, and I understand that when something really terrible happens, you don't necessarily, you're not in a place where you can just buck up and, you know, buckle down and fix it. But it's still frustrating. All that being said, it's still frustrating to watch, like you said.
I mean, he's a person who, through the class he's teaching, is striving for these people to reach this essential honesty in their writing, right? Like, this is the thing that's most important to him, is being honest. And he is not doing that over and over and over again. He's not being honest. And like, his moment of honesty in that moment is to turn the camera on and show these people what he looks like. And even that is like, I don't know, man. I'm so conflicted about how to feel about that, because even that is like, it's not really being honest about who he is. It's like he thinks that showing them what he looks like is an honest assessment of who he is as a person. Because I think he's defining himself so much by the fact that he is this obese man, because that is his great flaw, and that he can, man, it feels weird to say like he allows him to be pitied by people, because it feels overly mean to him. Because like, I don't know, like I said, I don't think this is the kind of thing where like getting fat is not like one choice that you make one day. It's a million tiny choices over time. And then suddenly you look in the mirror and go, oh, fuck. And you can either do something about it then, or you choose not to, because that's easier. And then one thing leads to another.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea that you sort of posed that as like a distraction, or the idea has come up in this conversation that he's like using these sort of obvious physical things as like a smokescreen to obscure his real flaws, his real mistakes. I don't know whether to put it so cynically though, because I again, like you said a minute ago, I don't think he did it on purpose. I think it just is a thing that happened. But now that it has happened, he's hiding behind it. He's, or like taking advantage of it, maybe. I don't know. Okay. I don't want to get too far away from what we were just talking about, the daughter, and I want to kind of finish that thought, because I had like a final thing I wanted to say. There was a lot of my interpretation of the movie hangs on the last, not 90 seconds of the movie, where she suddenly, after being just a total monster the entire film, understands that he's like imminently dying, and suddenly shows like real, humanity for the first time, and seems distraught by this, and actually, does read the essay to him, which you can see as like, oh, it's like she wouldn't have done that if she were really this just like dark creature that she pretends to be. And she reads, she reads the essay, and then at the very last second, it's like she gets to the last line, which she doesn't actually finish, and we never actually know what that very last line is.
Yeah, what is that last line?
Let me find it. I don't have it anymore. Damn. I had it open, but it was, I think it was something like, it makes me think about my own life, and it makes me glad that, and then she like stops as if surprised, and looks up, and that's when he like dies, like in that instant. And it makes you wonder, like, was it going to say like, it makes me glad that my dad is not, has spared me his own sadness, or like, I don't know how
it makes me glad for my, and then that's what it is. Yeah.
It makes me glad for my something. And I don't actually think that it said for my dad abandoning me, although it might have, but I think it's interesting because, it recontextualizes her character, right? It's like I said, it's the very, very, very end of the movie, and it recontextualizes her because it makes you realize like she just loves her daddy who abandoned her, and that's incredibly painful. It's unimaginably painful, and you're finally actually seeing the truth of that. What was my point here? I think my point was just that bit changes her whole character, and I don't know, like it's much. I think if it wasn't for that very end of the movie, I would be much more inclined to be like, no, I think he's just like toxically optimistic and is projecting his wish to have not been a horrible person onto her actions, and like basically being willfully blind. And then the very end of the movie, I think, is like the little crack in that interpretation.
I now think it said that it made her glad that her father was not in her life. Okay. I think I do. I think that's what it was.
Okay.
Because like, yeah, she's talking about how in her interpretation of Moby Dick, the incessant chapters that just describe whales forever is a choice by the author to hide the sad parts of the story, or to put off the sad parts of the story, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes her glad for her life because she realizes she doesn't need to do that, or something that I think that's what it is. I don't know, because that would, I guess, because that would justify in his mind staying away from her, right?
Yeah.
This that she had this realization,
right, and
that she's obviously forgotten about, that he was aware of the whole time. And it would also make sense how on his like monthly, how is Ellie doing? She's like, oh, you want to know how Ellie's doing? Here's this essay where she says she's glad that you're not in her life. Like it feels like the kind of vindictiveness born out of anger that his wife might do to him.
Yeah, that seems very plausible, actually. Yeah. And then the, like her sort of shocked, startled reaction when she looks up at him, I think is I think that's the biggest selling point for this theory. Because she doesn't finish reading it. It's like she stumbled across something she didn't expect to see, and that's
and the person who is established to have perfect memory, right? That's like the thing she says is, I remember this perfectly, and we see that's not true. That perhaps she had this moment of realization that she forgot because she didn't want to deal with it, and he's allowing her that moment in his final moments. It's basically like, you can let me go now, because remember this one time you learned to let me go? I'm gonna leave now. Let me go. But I still, man, I still think she called the church to fuck this kid over just because she thought it was fun to do. And like, I'm not saying that I don't think she's like a sociopath, and I don't think she's evil like her mother. I think it's very understanding for the mother of a teenage girl who is troubled and difficult to be like, she's just fucking evil, man. I can't stand this, especially since she's largely having to deal with this alone. Like, I think I think she's just angry and hurt and has some issues, and those issues are manifesting in how she's behaving and her kind of just hatred of everything and everyone. And I guess it is unrealistic to me, and it feels too optimistic, too Charlie, to be like, yeah, her motive for this was to help that guy. Actually,
I don't particularly think it was. So maybe this was obvious to you, but I just kind of did the mental exercise of like, okay, she's Ahab. Like she was wounded. Very badly wounded, fundamentally wounded by the whale, her father. And she hates she hates him in the same way that Ahab hates the whale and obsesses over the whale and thinks that I'm going to kill the whale and then I'm going to feel better. That's what will make me happy, is if I don't think she literally wants to kill him, but it's like her hate of her father is driving her in the same way that the hate of the whale drove Ahab. And Ahab, confession time, didn't read Moby Dick. My understanding is that he's not a very nice person.
No.
And so it's like, yeah, I don't think she's a very nice person, but I think the reason she's not a very nice person is she's wounded. She's using anger as fuel and realizes, basically too late to do anything about it, that killing the whale, that this was never going to make her happy. Her anger was never a path to anything other than desolation.
Yeah. But he is essentially allowing himself to be her whale too. Like, you could say this whole transformation is physically transforming himself into her whale, right?
Yeah.
And then allowing himself to die at the end so she doesn't destroy herself trying to kill him.
Yeah. I mean, I think so.
A fucking bummer, man.
Yeah, it's a super bummer, right? Like, I think one reason why you and I are sort of trying to turn this thing around and see it from different angles is we just don't like that. we don't find it. It's like, yeah, it's not that every movie needs to be all smiles and cheerful. I think it's worth saying, like, we haven't had this specific complaint about other Aronofsky movies, because other Aronofsky movies have ended very, very low. It's just, this feels particularly like almost nihilistic.
Yeah.
And again, like, Charlie's optimism is not really, in my opinion, like, we should all be more like Charlie and see the brighter side of things. It's like, no, he's delusional.
Yeah, like the idea that people, like, yes, people can be wonderful, but people are awful, and at times as well, right? Like the people caused the love of his life to kill himself. The people drove the love of his life to this. Like, the idea that, I don't know, it feels ultimately dishonest what he's saying. I don't know if I think he actually believes it, because I think if he believes that all people are good and wonderful, then I think he wouldn't be afraid to turn the camera on his class.
Yeah. That,
like, he does that out of embarrassment and shame, and also because he knows people would be pretty mean about it. Yeah. I think it is really fascinating that this church that drove his boyfriend to suicide, like, he doesn't seem to hate them. And again, I don't believe, I have trouble believing that either. Like, I think he's the type of person who has like read Moby Dick and said, oh, it is ultimately destructive to constantly chase after your white whale, so I'm just going to pretend like I don't have a white whale in my life. And it's bullshit. Of course you do. If you wouldn't be eating yourself to death if you didn't.
Yeah.
But you're not being honest with yourself.
Yes, that's a point I feel like we keep almost saying and then not quite saying, is this is a character who talks about honesty constantly. He loves the idea of honesty, but he's full of shit all the time. Yeah. Like, everything he says is self-justification and narratives that protect, like, and that was part of my confusion. Is, for a while I was taking him at his word when he would explain things to people, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, this is very reasonable. It's very reasonable. And then eventually I was like, no, I don't believe anything he's saying. Like, I think he's just very dishonest with himself, with everyone, with his caretaker, with his ex-wife, with his daughter,
with himself,
with himself. Like there's not even a moment that I can really point to where I can say that he's really being honest, that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting that we see, like, that the relationship with his boyfriend was defined as a teacher-student relationship. Now, again, it was night school. They were both adults. I don't think we're trying to do anything predatory here, but there is a power imbalance there, right? And I wonder if we're trying to say something about that power imbalance. Subtextually, obviously, it's not in the text of the thing itself.
Yeah, well, I think I follow you in the sense that people are constantly bringing it up as an issue, and he's constantly downplaying it in the same way that he will downplay every thing that
Yeah.
that like it's just a pattern with him where it's
Yeah.
just like, well, no, let me explain that, and then he says something, and you're like, and then you eventually realize that's not true.
Yeah. Because he says we waited until the class was over, right? Like we waited, and then we didn't do anything until after that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's like not why people are not happy with the student teacher relationship. It's not just because, oh well, it's after the class is over, so it's okay now. It's this power imbalance, right? It's this idea that the relationship was fostered under this kind of unfair power balance.
Yeah.
And even if you wait till after the class is over to, I don't know, it feels like I think there is parts you can read into, this is an incredibly religious man that is struggling with being gay and being religious and unsure how to handle these two sides. And his boyfriend is just telling him, fuck God, you don't need any of this shit. All you need is me. And like, right? Like there's an interpretation of that that's like, you fucked him up actually. Like, and maybe that's some of the guilt he feels for that. And I think you can read the scene of Liz saying, no, you gave him the best years of his life, and thank you for that. You can read that positively, but you can also look at her other behavior throughout the entire movie, which is enabling this destructive behavior of his. And you could say, oh, maybe that's just her enabling him too, because she misses her brother. And this is the last connection she has to her brother, this guy. And so maybe that's kind of bullshit too. I don't know. I think I might be reading too much subtext into the stuff, but I feel like it might be there.
No, I definitely felt some of the stuff you're talking about. And again, my question was more along the lines of like, is this meant to be just the reading of the movie, or is this meant to be something that, this struck me as a movie that was designed for people to walk out of the theater and be like, so what do you think was the end of the essay?
Yeah.
What do you so do you think like the question of like, was the daughter actually a monster or not, I think is meant to be something we're supposed to wonder about. I think the question of, is Liz, sort of enabling him out of a way of soothing her own sense of loss, or does she actually love him and he's a friend that she actually cares for, or like, can both of those things be true at the same time? And I think that's actually maybe closer to the heart of it, actually, is like, maybe these aren't either ors. Maybe these are all just, yes, humans are contradictory animals, and she both loves and hate the daughter both loves and hates her father. The ex-wife both loves and hates her ex-husband, clearly, right? Like we see that.
Yeah.
Liz is both a good friend and an enabler who is helping him kill himself. Yes to all.
Yeah.
And that's it's almost like hard to accept, but I think that might be what the movie's saying. Like, I think this is so far the closest thing to a read that kind of ties everything together for me.
Yeah. It kind of makes me like the movie a little bit better too. Honestly. It makes it seem a little bit more complicated than I was giving it credit for. I am still kind of struck by how visually boring this movie is.
Yeah.
So like, I read here that this was Aronofsky's first film shot on digital, and my gut reaction to that was, oh, that's why it looks like shit. And I think the lighting of this movie is like really weird. It's lit very darkly constantly. And you're in this enclosed space in an enclosed frame the entire time. I don't think Aronofsky's doing too much flourishiness with the camera. Like all the usual, the big fear I had on this movie, Matt, was that we were going to lose all Aronofsky's Aronofsky-ness. And we essentially do. I mean, with the exception of the final moments, which were a dream sequence, as he's dying, presumably. That's it. From like, we don't leave this room. There's times when I swear to God, I joked about this earlier, but they block the scene like it is a stage play. You know that thing in stage plays where characters just have movement on the scene. It's like a scene where like people are just talking, but you like need stage movement because you're just watching people on a stage. And so someone will like get up and walk like 2 steps to the left and then turn around and then just keep talking. Like, I feel like that's what this movie did a lot.
Well, and it seems a little bit more distracting. I agree. It seems a little bit more distracting because he's always just sitting in the same place.
Yeah.
And so you have him.
He can't move. So they have to move around him. Yeah.
So you have him and whatever woman he's talking to, because they're mostly women.
Yeah.
Darting all around like a hummingbird, which, you know, it's not that I have a problem with blocking. Obviously, it's just like, it was kind of a lot. And I wanted to hit on what you said at the very end of the movie, like when each of the characters like leaves his house, the door, there's like a very Aronofsky shot of them like walking out of the door, and the door is like this portal of like bright, overwhelming light, and their hair is blown by the breeze like angelically, and it's the only the ending, not just the dream sequence, but maybe the 5 minutes before that was the only part that really felt
Aronofsky. And Aronofsky like clearly like put some big fucking lights right there, so like it's like it's as if they're ascending to heaven and leaving him in hell. But in his final moment he does, like, we do fade to white there, right? So
and his feet leave the ground. He's saved.
I don't know if we said this. I don't know if we had this conversation before we started recording or not. I can't remember, but reading that the ending is ambiguous as to whether he died or not was the most hilarious thing I've ever read ever. Like, his blood pressure at the start of the movie is like what, 240 over 180. It's like you're going to die imminently, blood pressure, and then someone really said, I wasn't sure if he died at the end of the movie. He definitely did.
He dead. He's dead. Yes.
He basically had a week-long heart attack and then died.
Out of all of the movies that we've watched where the character dies at the end, this is perhaps the least ambiguous.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Yeah. I don't know. Ultimately, like, to kind of bring this home to Aronofsky, like, he's obviously just very interested in people with a sort of self-destructive kind of behavior, right? Like, if you look at all of these movies, all 8 of these movies, these are all characters that kind of allow themselves to be destroyed in one way or another.
And it's always like the tragedy of being human, I think, where it's not really their fault, or if it is their fault, it's in a sense where like, well, it's because of some flaw that is innate to who they are, and they couldn't choose to be otherwise. So can you really say it's their fault? Everyone is, in other words, everyone is damned by their own nature in a way where it's inescapable, which is, again, bummer, but very, very interesting art, though. You know, I wonder how this conversation is going to sound when I listen to it later, because and I say that because like all of these movies have been bummers, but we've generally loved them, and I still love Aronofsky. Like, I think he's like a very talented artist. I think he always approaches. I think he always is interested in like very deep subject matter, which he explores in a way that I find very compelling and stimulating. But it's just I think this one, it left me with too many of these feelings of like, wait, how am I supposed to feel about this? And that's, I struggle with that. Personally.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately what I think is, you know, that question I asked at the very beginning of the show is like, why did I like Mother so much and dislike this as much as I did, when essentially they are similar movies about, you know, a dour outlook on the future of people. And I think it just comes down to the Aronofsky shit that I love is when he gets weird and like cosmic and like if you look at The Fountain, if you look at Black Swan, if you look at Mother, Requiem a little bit, and Pi a little bit, like when he is fully leaning into like his weird, like very aesthetically different style of directing, like that's when I think he's at his most powerful. And like there is a part of me that wonders, could you take this play? Could you take The Whale? Could you take these ideas and also like go fucking full Aronofsky on it and have made something that perhaps I left it with the same questions and uncertainties and dissatisfaction that I had in a film like Mother, but like it was like I don't know, man. There's nothing oppressive. Like we talked about, like Aronofsky films as movies, like they're oppressive attack to your senses, and there's nothing like oppressively attacking my senses about this movie, except for like, whoa, this guy's really fat,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like it. And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, there are people that are that big, right? Like
Yeah.
that. Yes, that's sad, and it is. And again, I don't know. It feels weird that I feel like the camera wants me to think he's disgusting, and that feels. I don't know how to feel about that at times. I still don't. At the end of this conversation, I still don't. So yeah, it's like you made me, the way you made me uncomfortable and you attacked my senses in this movie is just by putting Brendan Fraser in a 300-pound fat suit, where in Mother you did it by like there's all these dramatic cuts and camera movements and styles and you know, huge things happening, and you built a mechanical baby that you ripped. Like there's all these different elements all working together, music and sound and all these things. And I really feel in this movie it's just, well, we put an actor in a 300-pound fat suit, so that's gonna be pretty uncomfortable for you to watch, right? And that's it. And it's just like, that's not what I go to Aronofsky for. Like this is, I enjoyed The Wrestler as a movie, but I had that same feeling of like, this is a very safely, normally directed film that I just don't want my Aronofsky like this.
Yeah. No, I agree with the same complaint with The Wrestler in terms of just like stylistically. I'm like, well, this didn't call for his strengths, really.
Yeah.
You know, I'll say along the lines of like, does the movie want us to think he's disgusting? I'm not sure. Maybe so. I think one thing it did for me, and I think this is like a compliment, I guess, assuming this is what they were trying to do, is like never really thought about how much it would suck to live a life like that and to have that kind of physical constraint.
Yeah.
And the movie really did make me empathize with like, oh my God, like that would be so unpleasant in all of these ways. And it like shows you all the ways in which that would be miserable. And like just, you know, the scenes where he's like, where it's time for him to go to bed, right? Like it's a sequence where I think the first night we follow him, you know, he has to get out of his seat on the couch, which is a struggle. He's in pain all the time. He's sweating, he's wheezing, he's physically miserable. And then he has to walk with this walker. And it gives you this sense that he could just totter over and fall. And that would be even worse at any moment. And then he makes it to bed and he has to use the police, the handhold to get into bed. And like everything about that, it's like, well, you could look at it as like the movie is emphasizing the disgustingness of it, but also I think for me it just made me feel how miserable this is and how miserable this character is.
And I think this is something that I can speak to as a fat man myself, although obviously not close to the size that this character is at all. The most insidious thing about this is it's not like, and maybe you skinny folks don't understand this, Matt, but you don't feel fat. Like when you close your eyes, your mental image of yourself is not fat. It's just, you feel like you, and like you spend a lot of time watching a lot of media, people of average sized people, and like that, so that your mental model of yourself in your head is that. And there are exceptions to that. Like I'm sure, especially with a person as morbidly obese as he is, the wheezing and the coughing, like these are things that, and the getting around being more difficult, these break that mental illusion a little bit. But I'm sure there are moments where he closes his eyes and he doesn't feel like he's 600 pounds. And that's the same thing with with me. There are moments that like, and then you look in a mirror and you're like, oh wait, no, I'm much bigger than my mental image of myself is. And that's how kind of insidious it is. And that's how you can get to a point where you are suddenly much, 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 much bigger, because when you imagine yourself, that's not how you're imagining yourself. And that's not how you feel. Just like, like it really, like, feeling fat isn't like a thing. I mean, I'm sure it is. Again, I'm sure it is when you are the size that Charlie is in this movie, but probably not constantly.
Well, and he probably normalizes so many of the things that are in his life that it's just his life now. It's not, he doesn't really perceive it as specifically as part of that. So it's really interesting. I agree with you. Like, the movie is very effective at making you go, gosh, this would be absolutely awful. And then you're gobsmacked as to why he would eat an entire pizza. Yeah.
And literally be Googling the heart attacks while eating candy.
Yeah, that was an interesting scene. I think that's yet more stuff where even in the moment I was this might sound silly, but in the moment I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to make of this, and I don't know what I'm going to say about it when we have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I need to have a handle on this to talk about it, damn it. And I mean, I thought it was a fascinating scene when he's looking up congestive heart failure, and he has, Brendan Fraser, excellent actor. He's portraying this like really intense consternation of like, oh shit, like that's really, like, this is really a bad situation. And then his response, and I think maybe part of my reaction was like, oh, okay, maybe this is the scene where he decides to take this more seriously. And then it's like, no, he just ignores it and goes and eats candy.
Well, he does for like a fraction of a second, right? He puts him away. He puts the candy away, and then he takes it right out again.
Right.
And this is the thing. I mean, ultimately, it's a disease. Like, I think it's no accident that we see several, like every other character that in this movie has some sort of habit or addiction. Like, there's lots of smoking. There's pot, which is not like itself physically addictive, but like it's still, like, anything can be an addiction, right? And these characters are hopelessly attached to these addictions. It's just that Charlie's addiction makes him look 600 pounds, and it is an addiction. Like, it is like there's something irrational and innate about wolfing down an entire pizza, and like that when he goes on that binge, like that is just binging. Like, that is just a disease at that point.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many moments that felt like mirrors of moments in The Wrestler, like where it's like he almost seems to be like he's gonna get it on track, and then the self-destructive spiral is kicked off by some adverse thing that happens to him, and then it's just absolute, downhill, and everything's worse than it was before. And you kind of feel like, oh, this is probably how he got this way, is like a series of being triggered into these binges, and then it's just normalized like this.
Yeah, I mean, I bet he even, like, maybe the first time he hit 300 pounds or 400 pounds, he was like, okay, it's gone on too far. I need to do something about it. Maybe he spent a day or two walking around more, trying to eat less. Like, I bet there are, along this road to hit the weight he was at and to his death, moments of, oh shit, I need to get this under control, and maybe even brief moments of success in that. Like, this is how this thing works, right? It's hard, especially when you have it as an addiction. It's very, very hard. It's very easy to look at you and just say, hey, just stop eating and go walk more. You don't even have to like lift weights, just go for walks. Like that, even that is something, but it's hard. It's hard for these people.
And it's especially hard when you've got a nurse who comes by and brings you a bucket of chicken. Like I think it's important to emphasize, like, this is a dynamic situation where he's not the only player, and he's got, his ex-wife probably, we don't really necessarily see this directly, but you imagine, like, anytime he shows a little bit of personal strength, she's like, oh yeah, you piece of shit, you guy who abandoned your family. And then he's got the angel on one shoulder, demon on the other, and it just seems hopeless when you kind of step back from it. I agree. It's like part of you is like, come on, man, And then part of you is like that he was doomed. There was no way out of this, and he was
Yeah.
doomed by his own nature.
Yep.
Isn't it kind of a screwed up thing to do, to tell your daughter that you're going to help her write an essay, and then you send her to turn in the essay that you know is the wrong essay that she wrote when she was 13,
Yeah.
and then she gets an F?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Like,
For sure.
Like what the hell, man?
Well, and he's like, you didn't read it? And she's like, no, of course I didn't read it. Like, what did you think she was going to read it? Like, I'm sure he thought in his head this was going to be like a really clever thing, and that she would read it and be like, oh yeah, it's that essay I wrote. Oh, and come back and like embrace him and tell him how good of a dad he is, and then he can die happy. But of course, no, she just turns it in and then fails. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess the question is like, and I think the ultimate feeling of hopelessness that we have coming out of this movie is like, I don't believe that his daughter is just gonna like be good now.
I agree, unfortunately. I would love to be able to believe that she had an epiphany in that moment when the Aronofsky backlighting was gliding through her hair, which was waving beautifully in the breeze of the door, that she had an epiphany and was gonna, I can let down this burden of anger, and now my father is dead, but we got to reconnect there at the very end, and so all of my resentment over the last 8 years is just fixed now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, the lesson of Moby Dick is that what her essay says, right? That like the killing of the white whale is not going to solve your problems. And now her white whale is dead. Yeah. Great. Right. Great. I am like, we didn't talk about Tommy very much, but like the idea that, he stole this money from his church. Then he goes running off. They're desperate to find him. She connects them again, and he gets a call from his parents, or calls his parents, and is told, oh, it's only money. Again, maybe this is just the cynic in me, but like, yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. Like, when we're worried sick about you and are just happy that you're coming home now. But like, is that problem fixed now too? Like, that seems like a very short term solution to the problem, is like, I ran away, I stole from, like, this is the father that catches you smoking pot and is going to then send you on a mission to Idaho. Is he really gonna, I mean, maybe he'll be like happy to see you, and that'll last for like 2 weeks, and then he'll catch you smoking pot again. And it's like, oh fuck. I don't know. What
I think we could stand to talk about him a little bit more, actually. Sure. Because he was a very interesting character, because there's a lot of like, I almost am more interested in him than I am in the other characters, which is weird because we didn't talk about him much. But like, at first it's just like, oh, it's a door-to-door missionary. I know what this is. It's a trope. And then he keeps coming back, and you kind of like, he seems genuinely to want to help Charlie. He obviously has like, a specific religion brainworm, where the only thing the only way he's gonna allow himself to help is like via conversion. But he regardless of that, he has like this actual desire to help people, and we see that when he kind of has his monologue, where he's like, the thing that drove, like, yeah, he was smoking pot, but the thing that kind of like alienated him from the church was like, I wanted to actually help people. I had all these ideas for how we could actually help people and make a meaningful difference in their lives. And the church people just wanted to do this like paint by numbers, like, yeah, we got to do the thing that we always do. And it's like, they're just patting themselves on the back, giving themselves credit for doing it, not really having accomplished anything. And this is very frustrating to him. And then he does this thing, which is like, from a certain perspective, insanely admirable, which is like, I'm just gonna go be a missionary. I'm gonna be a wandering monk with no support system at all. I don't know where he was showering or sleeping, but
just the Y. It'll be fine.
It's just at the Y probably. And that's like a really compelling and interesting character, right? Where he's so driven by his desire to help. Even like he's even like compelled to help Charlie, who he thinks is disgusting. Like he admits at the end of the movie, he admits that he thinks he's disgusting, but he still is actually, he's trying to help him in a way that's kind of messed up but
no, that's I think the key to this for me is that you're absolutely right that like he's built as this person that like, oh, he's maybe Aronofsky like trying to show like the good like side of religion. We have this bad side that took Alan and destroyed him and guilted him into suicide, but then we have this good side of this guy who actually genuinely wants to go out and help people, actually like wants to spread the word for real of like kindness and empathy and all these good words that our boy Jesus Christ taught to treat people. But then when he comes time to actually help Charlie, what is he saying to him? He's saying your boyfriend killed himself because what he was doing was an affront to God.
Right.
And there's still time for you to repent and save yourself, which is like, fuck off, man.
Yeah,
right. It's the most like, oh, you suck actually. And so that's so fascinating, right? Like,
yeah,
he is built this certain way, and then nope, not actually.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because ultimately he's not helpful at all. He leaves having accomplished nothing, despite all of his and again, there's kind of the two sides of the thing, because he genuinely is motivated, that he wants to help people.
Yeah.
He does. He threw away his life because he's so motivated to help people. Yeah. But he's cursed with this sense where like the only way he knows to help people is with this method that is never going to help people, because it's just it's cursed. It's just condemnatory and poisonous. That's really great.
Oh man, I don't know how to feel about it. I really don't, because I mean, like, he serves as kind of the catalyst through which Charlie is embraces the most optimistic read of his daughter, right? So he matters to the plot in that line, but like, how are we supposed to feel about him ultimately? I'm just not sure.
Yeah, there was one line there, or one kind of idea that I want to connect to this, or even though I'm very unsure of it, is like, one of the characters says, I don't think you can really save anyone. But there's like a fun irony, which is the closest anybody comes to really saving anyone is when the daughter tries to ruin his life. Yeah. And accidentally causes a prodigal son to happen. And you're like, oh, so maybe it's, and then I don't really know how to finish that sentence, because I'm like, is it that it doesn't even matter what your intention is. Sometimes I don't know.
Well, I mean, it was honest, right? I mean, I'm trying to grasp onto this idea of honesty, because it's this like, it allowed for radical honesty, and I don't know, man.
Well, there's well, here's an interest. Okay, so this is really interesting. I like this thread, because her Facebook page, where she just posts heinous shit all the time. Yeah, that's honest, right? That's a certain perspective. That's what he
says, right? Yeah.
Right. Like that's like a certain lens on. I mean, it reminds me of the people who go in for radical honesty, where like, you're standing in line at the coffee shop and they're like, your shirt is ugly, and it's like there was no, there's no like actual reason to say that type of thing. This is not an event that happened. It's just a random thing that I thought of. The point is like there's honesty, and then there's like performative, like, look how honest I am. Look how edgily honest I am. I'm going to be so honest that I'm going to try to ruin your life. And it's like, is that really honesty? Is that is that virtuous? Is that what we mean when we talk about the virtue of honesty? Because I don't think it is. But it is interesting, at the very least, that her, excess of honesty is the thing that leads him to go back home to his parents, which is like the one, like, kind of good thing that happens in the entire movie. Yeah. And even that is ambiguous, obviously, because it's like, well, his family isn't the best people. We already know that. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the way I kind of want to finish this conversation is the line that Charlie says, I think to his wife, maybe to Liz, which is, do you ever get the feeling that people are incapable of not caring?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Matt?
I mean, most people, it's probably true to some degree. He says a lot of things that I feel like they belong in like one of those young adult novels that's meant to like be really profound.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether that's intentional. What I mean is, I don't like, is it, am I supposed to kind of roll my eyes when he does these things, or am I supposed to think like, so wise, you know?
Yeah.
Because clearly not everyone is that way.
Yeah.
Like there are people who are just actual monsters who are very capable of not caring.
Yeah.
So what does he mean? Like, it's a Pollyanna-ish thing to say, really. Like, it's a silly thing to say.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I guess most people, when they see someone suffering, they'll feel a pang of sympathy. But the sympathy is not going to motivate them to action necessarily.
Yeah.
And if it does motivate them to action, it's going to be in a totally screwed up way that causes more harm than good, like the missionary kid.
Yeah. No, you're right. What does caring get you without action behind it ultimately?
Right.
And like the great irony of this movie is that line, people are amazing, that he says, which the people that he surrounded himself with, like the only people that he interacts with, don't seem to lend that idea a lot of credence. I mean,
Yeah.
it's part of why I feel like he's just bullshitting, and like this desire for relentless optimism is just another smokescreen.
Yeah.
That it's just like, well, your daughter's horrible. Your wife has a drinking problem and is also struggling and like is harboring so much anger at you and a lot of other things. Your nurse is an enabler who has her heart filled with hate as well. Like this kid that comes over is disgusted. Like just like it's horrible examples of people.
Yeah.
Like across the board.
Yeah.
And then people are amazing.
Yeah. No, I think it's funny. I think my feelings about this movie have changed quite a bit in the last hour of conversation, but like they haven't changed directionally so much as they've kind of rotated. Where I kind of feel that the movie is smarter and maybe saying more interesting things than I originally thought, but I kind of still emotionally feel the same way about it, which is that it's a huge bummer.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I did like the one, just from a writing perspective, the way they showed that she's an alcoholic is that she said, she looks very stressed, and then she says, do you have anything?
Yeah.
And he knows that she means liquor because he knows her. And that's good writing.
Because that's her addiction. Because every character in this movie has an addiction of some sort.
Yep.
Oh, people are amazing. The thing is, I actually do believe that. I believe people are amazing. Like, I think people are incredible and capable of so much kindness and empathy and wonderful acts. I think that's true. I just also recognize that I live in a world where I can look around and see that also people can be cruel and terrible. And I don't think ultimately that choosing to only look at the good side is healthy. Like, I wonder if he was in this girl's life, would he be an effective father? Because he doesn't seem to want to acknowledge her flaws and her misbehavior and anything like that. All he can see in that is good. Oh, you posted a picture of me publicly admonishing me, and like, I am clearly isolated. I clearly don't like going. Part of the reason I don't want to go to the hospital is just because I'm embarrassed of myself, and I'm embarrassed of what it would take to get me to the hospital, and having these people see me, and you're gonna like take a picture of me and put it on the internet to make fun of me publicly. Like, that is the type of thing that you can't look at that and just be like, she's just being angry and honest. You have to say, no, that's a terrible thing to do. A parent should be like, no, that's not an appropriate way to behave,
Right.
even if you're angry. Like, no, you don't
Yeah.
do that. You don't drug someone
Yeah.
so you can wander around their house while they're asleep.
Right. I mean, I feel like he, you know, it's hard to say, but like, I feel like on a deep level, this character knows that he screwed up and he's just desperately trying to tell himself a story where
Yeah.
he's not a complete failure. And it's like, yeah, well, good luck.
Yeah. Man, we talked about this movie way longer than I thought we would. But I mean, I guess that's a sign of if not a good movie, an interesting movie.
Yes, that's a good point. I thought it was very interesting. I'm not super surprised because I came into this with this list of confusions that I knew I was going to have to work through with you, and I'm really like I feel like I did. Like I feel like I found I consider this a success because I feel like I unraveled some things, or at least have a better guess for a lot of things than when I walked into this. So
yeah, and I feel like I'm now debating whether my mental list that we're about to try to make has shifted a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Speaking of which, do you want to let's talk about Aronofsky?
Yeah,
This guy we've been talking about for 8 weeks now.
Yeah.
This is all his movies. How are you feeling about this director at the end of this all? What do you feel like you've gained and learned, and where do you place him in, you know, your pantheon of directors?
Well, I think he's gone up a few notches. Not that I didn't already love him, but I saw more of his movies. I will say one. So compliment sandwich, I guess. Like I love his artistry. I love his visual aesthetic. It's so unique. It remains unique even now. The downside is that I kind of realize that he tells the same story over and over and over, which is a thing that we've seen before in the Deconstructing directors, where you in this series and in other directors we've looked at, where you know I come into it thinking like, wow, this guy's got a really fresh vision, and then you're like, oh wait, it's the same fresh vision over and over. I don't want to come down too hard on that with Aronofsky, because I think there's enough artistic space between the things that he talks about that it never really feels tedious when you're watching it. But then when you watch all the movies in a row and you look at the constellation they form, you're like, oh, there's like a very specific thing that he's interested in, and he just studies that thing, and that's okay. Like there are painters who paint nothing but, you know, cubes or whatever, and so it's like, okay, fine. It's fine for an artist to have one thing they're focused on. It's just when you see it like that, I guess maybe it becomes a little bit less magic. And I shouldn't hold that against him too much, and I don't think I do hold it against him too much. It's just something that became obvious.
Yeah.
What do you think?
You know, I liked this guy a lot going into this. I feel like I like the movies that I enjoyed more, and I like the movies that I wasn't as big of a fan of less. So just to refresh everyone's, I had seen 6 of the 8 movies on this list. I had not seen Noah, and I had not seen The Whale. And I went in kind of basically saying, I bet The Fountain's going to be my favorite on this list. I really love Mother. And I enjoyed Black Swan, and I don't know how I feel about the rest of them. I'm very conflicted on Requiem and Pi, but I did not enjoy The Wrestler as much. And I kind of feel the same way a little bit, maybe a little bit stronger in my convictions on all sides of it. So yeah, it's really interesting. He is like, he's the type of director that I want to see continue to work. You know, he's never done a sequel. He's never really like been interested in playing in the franchise game. He wants to make original stories that are important and impactful to him, and I think he should get the lane to do that. We didn't mention this, but The Whale was pretty profitable. It's a movie that cost $10 million to make. It grossed just under $58 million worldwide, so that's a chunk of change. That movie made A24 a pretty good amount of money there. So I think he's going to get to do that more in the future. He's the kind of director that I definitely want to take a look at everything he does. Even the misses are interesting, and that's how I feel about The Whale ultimately, right? Like, yeah, this is a film that I didn't love, but I found fascinating enough to talk about it for almost 90 minutes on a podcast. So
yeah, right. I think that's one thing, is we knew this going into it, that like experientially speaking, his movies are miserable and nightmarish.
Yeah.
But they're beautiful art in the sense of like they cause you to think and ask questions and ponder human existence and all of these things that we love to do.
Yeah. So he has 2 movies listed on IMDb as upcoming. So that's interesting. 2 movies he's working on at the same time. You want me to read the quick description of these movies?
Sure.
The first is called Adrift. It is written by Aronofsky and Luke Dawson and someone named Koji Suzuki. It stars Jared Leto. And the caption here is, a fishing boat discovers an abandoned yacht with a strange distress call. A deckhand agrees to take alone control of it while it's towed into port, but soon discovers why it's called a ghost ship.
Okay.
So that feels like straight up horror in a way that I don't think we've seen Aronofsky do.
That's true. While I simultaneously suspect that we're going to, in retrospect, think that was a terrible description of the movie, but
yeah,
yes.
you might be right. You're right. It has him teaming up with Jared Leto again for the first time since Requiem, which is cool.
Yeah.
Although Jared Leto is really hit or miss for me. So we'll see. For
sure. Yeah.
This other movie is a film called Caught Stealing. It is written by Charlie Houston, who looks like is a TV writer, but wrote for the TV show Gotham and the TV show Powers. So a couple superhero shows on TV. It stars Austin Butler as Hank Thompson and Zoe Kravitz in an unnamed role. And the summary is, burnt out ex-baseball player Hank Thompson unexpectedly finds himself embroiled in a dangerous struggle for survival amidst the criminal underbelly of 1990s New York City, forced to navigate a treacherous underworld he never imagined.
Okay. Neither of these sound particularly like central Aronofsky fare, but anything. I do kind of feel like these are the pitch lines that then he transforms into being what he wants to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, the marketing machine on these movies really haven't even spun up yet because they're still in pre-production. They're not even in production yet. So, like, this is probably just like a press release thing, or even like you said, like literally a pitch line to try to sell the film. So, and we like neither of these might end up happening. So we don't know. But I agree with you. It is interesting how you can kind of maybe try to predict how this will become Aronofsky-y. I don't know.
Yeah, sounds good.
1990s New York City, though. Ooh.
Yeah, no, it's that's the most terrifying setting yet.
All right, Matt, let's move on to probably one of the hardest tasks we've ever had to do on the show. We now have to rank these 8 Darren Aronofsky films. You know, I think we did Ridley Scott before this, right? And that was a lot of movies. It's a lot more movies than here. But I feel like that was just in my head, like I mostly knew what the end of the list was going to be and the front of the list was going to be, and everything else was just kind of figuring out where those stuff go. I'm looking at these movies right now and I'm like, I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay. So why don't we start on let's work our way up, right? So let's start on number 8. I think it's got to be Noah or the Whale in the last spot.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say Noah because I think I like the Whale. I think I like the Whale more than you. I think the Whale is great art in a way that Noah is not, even if the Whale might have its flaws.
I think that's right. I enjoyed Noah for what it was, but yeah, I mean, I think that there's a movie like there's lots of fun Aronofsky things mixed in a movie that ultimately I don't think worked very well for me. While I think perhaps being his, I wouldn't say most interesting religious examination because there's Mother, but second most interesting religious examination, perhaps.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think now we immediately get to the point though where I lose the plot because I'm like, part of me wants to put Mother at the next slot, and then part of me thinks
I don't like that.
Yeah, right. Like the part of me is like that's crazy, but then I'm like, well, okay, well, then what would I put below Mother?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm struggling. Like, I enjoyed Pi, but I think you liked Pi a lot more than I did. So I think we're in a situation where, like, if this was my personal list, Mother would be in the top 3 probably, and I suspect that Pi would probably be in your top 3.
Yes, I basically came into this thinking like Pi is one that I just love almost like irrationally. Like it's one of those like made for me movies.
Yeah, Mother is my Pi.
Yeah.
So that's going to be difficult.
So I don't know how we're going to negotiate that exactly, but
I mean, ultimately, it means that neither of them can be at the number 7 spot because one of us will drag it a little bit forward.
So it has to be The Fountain.
Whoa. You like The Wrestler more than The Fountain?
No. I was gonna say either The Wrestler or The Fountain were for the next. So okay, let's
see. I was thinking either The Wrestler or The Whale.
Oh, I forgot about The Whale. Wait, I thought we already placed the whale. We didn't place The Whale yet.
We didn't technically place The Whale yet. No.
Okay. I would say The Whale goes in slot number 7, and then The Wrestler is in slot number 6.
I think that's fair as well. So that is our bottom 3. Now we've got 5 slots left, and now we're looking at Pi, Requiem for a Dream, The Fountain, Black Swan, and Mother. So,
yeah, we're gonna have to make some kind of deal.
yeah, we're gonna have to, because I know you would put Mother right here. I think I
would, and you would put it much higher.
Yeah.
So let's put. Okay, I don't want to put Pi there. You don't want to put Mother there. Let's just put whatever was going to be our next one that we agree on there.
Okay.
Though it may break our hearts.
It's either The Fountain or Requiem for me. I think at number 5.
I think The Fountain, weirdly enough, is the one movie where I thought I loved that movie, and then it went to like. Yeah, I guess it was very visually beautiful, but
that I love the visuals of that movie. I love the soundtrack of that movie. I'm not entirely convinced I love that movie, and that's a weird because I definitely thought that would be number 1 going into this thing.
I used to really love that movie, and I don't. Yeah. I almost feel slightly saddened to have lost that, but that's okay.
I like it more than you do, so I would definitely put it higher, but I'm willing to.
Okay.
Willing to relent on this. So number 5 is The Fountain.
Okay.
That leaves us. So we're halfway here. So that leaves us with Pi, Requiem, Black Swan, and Mother.
I'm okay. I'm actually okay putting Pi here. I'd feel I live with myself.
Okay.
Putting Pi here.
I am okay with putting Mother at 3.
Okay.
I would have been okay with putting Mother at 4, but you spoke first, so sucks for you.
I'm actually fine with like Mother is like more of a tour de force, whereas Pi is just a movie I really like. So,
yeah, no, that's fair. And so we have Requiem and Black Swan in the top 2 spots, which doesn't surprise me, honestly, because those are both really good movies. Like Requiem is just such an important statement of a film that crystallized what Pi started in, like what the Aronofsky style is. But I think Black Swan is. I think Black Swan goes to number 1, man. I think it's his best movie.
I don't think I'm going to argue with you. I mean, I think Requiem definitely has the biggest cultural splash.
Yeah,
but I think Black Swan it's so tight. Like when we rewatched it, that's kind of the opposite of what happened with The Fountain, where I was like, yeah, I remember liking Black Swan, and then we rewatched it, and I was like, this is razor sharp. This is just so well made. This is playing to all of his strengths. Yeah, I agree. I think this is a good list. I would stand by this.
Yeah, I like this. Okay, we did it. That took less time than I thought. I'm very proud of us. Actually, we made hard choices, and I got mine in the top 3, so I won.
Damn it. Well, you want me to read them out?
Yeah, read them back.
Yeah. So number 8 was Noah in last place. Then comes The Whale. Number 6 is The Wrestler. At 5th place is The Fountain. Number 4 is Pi. 3rd place is Mother. 2nd place, Requiem for a Dream. And the undisputed, objectively best Aronofsky movie was Black Swan.
All right, we did it. That's a pretty good list of films. When The Whale is a movie that we struggled with, but still enjoy talking about, is second to last on your list. And your big studio movie, like Noah, is the worst.
Yeah.
I feel like you're doing something right.
Sure. No, this isn't like the Ridley Scott list where we were like, well, these garbage movies that we basically made fun of the entire time obviously are going to be at the bottom. And like, yeah, he doesn't have any of those. He doesn't have any garbage movies that we made fun of. We kind of poked fun at Noah a bit, but I think even that had some merit to it.
Yeah, it became a much more interesting movie than I thought it was going to be, which is a pretty cool place to be. Yeah. That's great. That's great. So speaking of Ridley Scott, we do have some Ridley Scott homework to do, by the way. We never watched Napoleon, which
oh God, you're right.
which I am curious about. I think is probably going to slot in on the lower half of Ridley Scott's oeuvre, based on what I've heard. And then, the trailer for Gladiator 2 came out this week, and it became immediately like one of the most hated trailers of all time for some reason.
I haven't watched it. I can't bear the thought. I can't bring myself to it.
I'm really curious. Like it doesn't look great, but it doesn't look like bad. I honestly didn't know Ridley Scott was directing that movie. Like I thought he was just like exec producing it or whatever. Like they just handed him some stuff because of Gladiator, but no, he directed it. So we're gonna have to watch that movie. I know you're scared, but
yeah, it's gonna ruin my childhood.
It has Denzel being Denzel, so there's that.
Denzel is the most modern man in the world.
You know what? You need to watch the trailer because it's like, does Denzel try to like put an affect on his voice? No.
Oh my God. Well,
he's just straight from New York City into ancient Rome.
Okay.
Let's go.
That's fascinating. That is a choice.
Oh, I'm so excited. I like Napoleon is one of those ones that like I understand, even though I didn't see it. Like it surprises me none that people didn't like it, but I'm curious if we'll find something interesting in it. So we do need to watch that eventually. I'm not saying that's what we're doing next week, but I think we do need to watch that eventually.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Speaking of what we're doing next week, we don't know. So this is the end of a segment we've been on for a while. We do have a canon episode we need to do, so maybe we'll get that set up for next week. But what series we're going to do next, we're still working on that. We're undecided. I don't think we're going to jump right into another director again. But I did like, Matt, these 8 movie directors. A lot more enjoyable than 20 movie directors.
Yeah, I agree. We should stick to that going forward.
Yeah. But we'll figure out what we're going to do next. I have some ideas that I think people will perhaps enjoy. At least, most importantly, you and I will enjoy. But we'll figure that out. But
all right. Great.
That is it for Mr. Aronofsky, and that is it for this week's episode. If you have any opinions on The Whale or on Mr. Aronofsky, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on Twitter @doofmedia. You can also find us on our subreddit, r/doofmedia, where there will be a topic for this episode that you can jot down your thoughts in.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to subscribe and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, please consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and join our ranks of community members. That's a place where you can talk about Aronofsky and The Whale if you want to as well. There's a chat feature on Patreon now, and I check it regularly. So if you want to just say hey and chat with us, we will respond on there. So you can do that. And of course, you can support us and help make this content that we make.
Literally didn't know there was a chat feature on Patreon, so thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, please consider tossing us a rating and review over on the Apple Podcasts platform. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us this week. Hope you have a good week, and we'll see you next time.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.